I was at the WilCo Pow Wow last night, where I learned that the Department of the Interior proposed a 90% reduction in funding for TCUs, tribal colleges and universities. Let's talk about why we have TCUs in the first place, because I feel like some people have got it really wrong. So TCU is a legal designation and it qualifies for funding under the Tribally Controlled Colleges and Universities Assistance Act of 1978. Do remember that date. So in the past, our country and many others in the Americas, shout out to Canada, right, had a nasty little habit of residential schools. The philosophy behind these mandatory schools was forced assimilation, right? Richard Henry Pratt, who founded the pilot school, said, quote, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Kill the Indian? Save the man? The whole premise of these schools was that Indigenous people weren't people, right? And that's what you see in US history over and over again, right? The assumption that Native or Black or immigrant people aren't human. And back then, people already knew these residential schools were abusive, right? To tell someone that they are bad and that they should be something else is abuse. And let's be real, the goal of these schools never really was assimilation, right? It was about breaking. It was about ethnocide, which is when you kill a people's culture. And many years later, of course, we find mass graves behind these schools. Right? We hear stories of natives whose families spiraled into dysfunction from this abuse because they weren't being taught how to be white. They were being worked to death, underfed, and abused in what amounted to a concentration camp for children that parents couldn't opt out of. That didn't end until the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. Yeah, you guessed it, 1978. That act finally gave parents the right to take their kids out of those horror camps, and almost all of them did, right? And 1978, look, for context, I was an 80s baby. This history isn't far away at all. So fast forward with me to 2011, right? Obama signs an executive order to strengthen the tribal colleges in light of all of these revelations. He ordered the Department of Education to work closely with tribal governments to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for all Native students, whether they went to a TCU or not. Then, in 2024, Biden made an apology for all of this history. Right, and the idea was that these funds that they set aside, 90% of which are now going, were designated so that tribes can have more say over what kind of educational opportunities their children have access to, right? It is a key imperative that Native peoples get to decide for themselves what their children's education looks like, especially when you take the history of what we did, right? Of what our country did to Native children in the very, very recent past.